So, welcome everyone to the first ever podcast episode of the Equitable Wellness Podcast. And I am nervous because this is the first time I've ever recorded anything like this to put out there into the world. But here are my notes. I'm just going to tell you what the podcast is all about. This podcast highlights passion topics about equitable practices in the health and wellness space. For instance, how we look at spas, retreat centers, holistic practitioners, and services that incorporate equity or collective liberation in liberatory work. So this podcast is for business owners, service providers, coaches, personal brands, and artists who are passionate about the connection to equity and equitable practices in holistic health and healing arts. So before I introduce my wonderful guest who is here with me today, joining me from Homer, New York, I'll introduce myself briefly. I am Shayna Grajo, and I am coming to you here from the clouds, but also from Spain, in the south of Spain, in the city of Algeciras. And I am a health and wellness copywriter with a background in healing arts through massage therapy as a licensed massage therapist and as a yoga instructor. So in doing copywriting work, I've really wanted to focus the copy and the marketing through the liberation lens. And that's where we will get into the ideas of equity in wellness and luxury. All right. So today I'm introducing Ariel Herrera Molina, formerly Ariel Coral. She is a licensed esthetician, Reiki practitioner, and spa owner of Meraki Skin Co. in Homer, New York. She provides a sanctuary where clients feel genuinely seen, heard, accepted, and cared for in her spa, allowing them to reconnect with their well-being and experience healing from within. This environment nurtures both inner and outer beauty, embracing the individual needs of each person who walks through the door. Ariel's mission is to deliver customized holistic skincare and wellness services that go beyond the surface. Through energy healing, deeply personalized facials, and supportive guidance, she empowers clients to feel more comfortable and confident in their own skin. All right. Is there anything to add to that, Ariel?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Right. So our story is going to get to pregnancy and what it's like to be self-employed in business in the United States, in upstate New York. But before we, I guess, get into that, we can just mention briefly how we met, where we met, and talk about what equity is, because it's a conversation that is worth exploring. You and I met when we were both working at Ross's Spa, which was a holistic health spa in Ithaca, New York. We were working at the flagship location together on Taganic Boulevard in the Finger Lakes. And at the time, you were doing facials and waxing as the esthetician on staff, one of them. And I was either a massage therapist specializing in shiatsu, or I was also working at the front desk doing guest services and helping to operate the spa from the guest services, which you did too, actually. I'm remembering.
Yeah. We both. Yeah.
Right. And since we have this background in the spa industry, when I think about equity and how things kind of came together in that moment, I was part of a work group that Rasa had at the time that was like a BIPOC kind of diversity work group to help clarify DEI at Rasa. And of course, as we speak, this notion of DEI is a bit endangered in the US. And I'd always felt personally that the D and the I were less interesting to me than the E for equity, because diversity can be what it is. Inclusion or inclusivity sometimes implies assimilating into a culture that doesn't always paint the story of, I think, what real justice can look like. And so equity really, I think, is the juice of that of the acronym. Um, and there are probably many ways to look at equity, but the way that I feel about it is that it is bringing empowerment to those who have been historically oppressed from having power or having an imbalance of power through whatever forms of systemic oppression and historical roots. And so that applies to a very broad span of people, but it tends to be people outside of the, as one wonderful liberatory voice quotes it, white, cis, het, colonial, capitalist, ableist culture, or the dominant culture, or the kind of like supremacy power group. Anyway, that's a big mouthful. But Ariel, tell me, what are your thoughts about equity? And we'll start there.
For me, equity is about like accessibility. And not even just when you're talking about the wellness industry, not even just for clients, but also for service providers. And in this industry, I think what's really interesting is that I know, at least for me as a service provider, I am considered like a walking statistic. When you actually look at the history of spa service providers, it is very rare to see anyone other than the demographic that you just mentioned in the industry. And when I got into this industry, it was very, very uncomfortable finding a place that really felt like home to me, finding a place where I felt comfortable and respected, and finding a place where I wasn't being targeted or judged for my piercings, my tattoos, the color of my skin, how my hair looks. So there's a lot of delicate topics that we could talk about in terms of that. But I mean, there are so many that it's like, where do you even begin? You know? I remember when I first started out as a baby esthetician, you know, I was definitely reaching out to people of color and people who looked like me because I wanted them to feel like they had a comfortable space to be in as well. And I wanted my services to be accessible to them, which is what I consider equity is. And there are just little things that you don't consider or think of, like even people of color, our hair. You know what I mean? Like, you might wrap their hair differently than you would for someone who has different hair type. So, I mean, it's little nitty gritty things that unless you are actually in a situation, it's really, really hard to understand, and it may not even cross your mind. But to me, it is accessibility across the board in terms of both clients and service providers.
Right. Yeah. I remember back in the day of that work group. I don't, I hope it does, but I doubt that work group is existing currently. But because that work group came out in like 2020, this was like kind of the heat of George Floyd, BLM, and kind of 2020 that we all lived through.
Yeah.
And there definitely was a mentioning of the kind of injustice, if you will, of like the training that people receive at standardized massage schools or beauty schools or esthetician schools, where there's not always, quote unquote, the inclusion of these different types of hair, skin, and that there are different considerations. And then we can, of course, get into bodies and what different bodies need, everything from a pregnant person to a person who might have other forms of ability. And so, I mean, there's just, yeah, a lot of consideration in accessibility in the spa industry, but it does kind of start with education. And so there is a slant toward the lack of education around different types of people.
100%. And for me, that is huge in my industry because my industry is about skin. So I'm literally treating all types of skin. And so it does feel, um, it does feel like it is my responsibility to make sure that people of all skin colors, types, conditions like feel comfortable coming to me, because unfortunately there are a lot of estheticians who are not educated in different skin types and tones, and you would treat them differently. I think in general, I don't know exactly how massage school was, but I know for aesthetics, you are learning the very, very basics. You are learning how to pass state board, and then everything after that is up to you in terms of like continuing education. But
Hmm.
I definitely had to do a lot of research to even get the basics as to how to treat skin of color, because you're not even so much as touching that in school, not even touching it. And at the same time, you know, being a person of color, um, there's like not a whole lot on the market that is for you. So like if you go to, you know, I don't really shop at Walmart, Target, or any place like that for my skincare, but if you do go there for your skincare and your hair care, like we have like one little baby section. And that little baby section is companies that don't even look like us, right? So how exactly are they going to know how to treat our skin and treat our hair? I was actually just researching the other day, because being in the climate that we are in the United States right now, it is very important to me to spend my money where I feel it deserves to be spent. So it is my goal personally to start investing in BIPOC and LGBTQ businesses. But it is almost impossible to find a professional grade skincare line that is owned by a person of color. I believe I have been able to find literally one, and it is not completely up to my standards. And if you want to talk about why that is the case, if you are actually hiring a cosmetic chemist and creating a professional grade legitimate product, it is typically about $10,000 per product. So if you are someone who has not built generational wealth and your family hasn't been able to provide that for you, or you do not have connections because of the neighborhoods that you grew up in, the chances of you making a professional skincare line are slim to none, which is literally what I found researching and looking for this. So, I mean, again, there's so much to it, and so much is intertwined, and it's all connected. But that is how I look at equity in the wellness industry.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. I mean, I know we could keep going. I mean, there's many questions I have, right? Like how you do have because you've done a lot of your own education on your own, to develop yourself, of course, but I'm sure that you provide these resources to other people and other practitioners, and I'm sure that you do lead others in this way. I mean, that's one thing we could talk about, but then, right, like that equity of the accessibility that you say, when I'm thinking about what you were saying of a 10K investment minimum to launch something of the grade that you're seeking, or to meet these standards. Equity is about having the economic distribution available
Mhm.
for people who are not on an equal playing field. And so I'm grateful you want to invest in BIPOC and LGBTQ companies. It's definitely, it was, when I was a massage therapist in the US and practicing in my business, it was important for me as well to collaborate and honor that kind of commerce as well. Um, and yeah, it's a process. So coming to the current day, though, I know we're talking in late February 2025. There's been a few weeks into an administration change in the office of the president. Um, and I'm in Spain, right? I'm an American citizen, and I have a Filipino passport as well. But I guess, like physical distance makes me really kind of wonder, since I can't really glean everything off of social media and the news or the, different American friends that are in Spain. How do you feel? I know it's a very, again, it's a very partial question for you, but on the ground in the US, what is the morale like after kind of, I don't want to say losing the term diversity, equity, and inclusion or losing terminology rapidly? Like, tell me how it is feeling. Is a silly question, but tell me, how's it going?
It is a loaded question, and because I can only represent one little piece of the puzzle, I can only give you my opinion and how I feel and how I know other people in the area feel. Um, I think like in the United States right now, we are pretty divided for the most part. Like I think it's like almost a 50% divide.
Mm,
Um, you have half of the people here who would consider DEI to actually be more of like a form of separation. And then you have the other half of the people who live here who consider it necessary because of, historical separation for so long. Um, all I know is that I'm big on energy and feeling, and I'm very much an empath. And I don't know if you remember after, the first election that Donald Trump, I'll just say his name because why not? It's not like he's Voldemort. Like we're going to talk about, you know what I mean? But so I'll just say his name, but I don't know if you remembered after the first election when he won and it just was kind of like an unsettling time for people. It was like the next day you go out, you're looking at each other and it's like, I don't know who is who to trust, who to, if you could remember that, this feeling is like that times 10.
oof. Oh.
Like it's been intense. Like the first couple of weeks after he was sworn in, even going out to the store is uncomfortable, and you can just see how uncomfortable people are without actually saying words, with just feeling each other's energy. For example, I had to go out one of the days to get like cat food, and I go to the pet store, and there are a couple people in the store who look exactly opposite of me, right? And it's almost like this kind of like look that we give each other that is like this like we're not speaking obviously, but it's like this feeling. And I definitely felt like a couple of times I ran into a couple of people who I think were almost thinking like, I hope she doesn't think I am part of this, if that makes sense. Like, I hope she doesn't think I am part of this. It's just like this weird energy that is just kind of lingering, and we're just walking around like everything's normal, and it's not normal. So as I get to the actual checkout, there is a man who, again, is the opposite of what I am and look like. And I mean, he was trying to crack jokes to everybody in line. He had mentioned like it has been rough. It was rough for him because everybody's been hostile. It's a hostile environment right now. So when you go out, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, and you feel like you don't know who you can trust. That's the reality right now. And we're very, very, very much divided. I think you have extremists, any way that you put it, on each end. I would say that I am very passionate, but I've always been very passionate. I was originally going to school for political science and social studies education. I love this. And you'll have a lot of people who kind of want to back out of it. And they're like, I don't even want to deal with politics. But at the end of the day, politics affects every single one of us. It affects every single one of us. I know for me personally, going into February, which is Black History Month, and having DEI being removed from every corner of the country, it's uncomfortable. And I know for me, I personally think of my grandmother, who I was very, very, very close with. She was my best friend on the planet. And I think about all of the hard work that she did as both a woman and as both a woman of color to make sure that I have the accessibility that I do right now. And I'm just very thankful she's not alive to see this, because she worked way too hard for us to be eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, I personally, I like the whole acronym. I think and it's not to impose but it's to include. And this is my opinion as a person who is mixed race, both white and Black, but grew up in an all white neighborhood. It was very uncomfortable for me growing up. I did not feel included. I did experience my mother, who is a Black woman who was incredibly educated, constantly going back to school to further her education. I did witness her be passed up on positions that she absolutely should have had with people who had so much less experience than her. My whole life. That being said, that was my case as well. When I got out of aesthetic school, when I was in aesthetic school, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I am passionate about what I do. So I worked very hard. I was one of the best students, and all of the metrics that we use in terms of product sales, rebooking, things like that. I was, if not the top student, one of the top students in the school. But when it came time to actually going and getting a job, I remember being passed over positions that people in my class who could care less about aesthetics, who were just there to make money and would not go above and beyond to do the laundry and do the things that we needed to do to make sure that our space was clean and well taken care of, those women would get the jobs over me. And again, the only thing I can assume, because before we couldn't come out and say this because we had legislation that made sure we couldn't come out and say that we are being racist or we are being judgmental based on something. But I always felt in the aesthetics industry that the color of my skin, the tattoos on my skin, the piercings on my skin, I did not look like the people in the aesthetics industry. I still don't. I have a niche that is very much different than what my industry is all about. That being said, my industry is it is a facade. It is literally a facade. So, it just, to make a long story short, I've personally experienced being passed up on positions that I 110% should have had. And I've seen them be given to people who look beautiful and look the part, but do not have the professionalism and expertise and education that I have.
Gosh, thank you for sharing. I know, I mean, I remember when you worked, even, when I think back to Rasa and you were at the front desk with your tattoos, with, you still sold the damn products before everyone. You were a top seller. And I'm remembering back to the beginning of your transition to your business, right? That when you left being employed at a spa and you created your own brand, your own company, your own spa. I think it was because, not to say that anyone was holding you back, but you definitely exhibited the entrepreneurial skills and the know-how and the knowledge and the care and the service that is really required to do what I know you're capable of doing, which you've done for the last 4+ years, right? Of being able to manage a wonderful business where there's another practicing esthetician, where you've created growth, where you're going to be scaling into a new building for more room, for better service, and where you've done, extensive care, beyond caregiving of your community and different people and communities coming together. But you have always been, a star. Like, you've always shined. I'm not just saying that because it's like skincare. And I know for sure that your grandmother is smiling, right? And so we can transition to talk about your daughter.